Without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Uh, Tim Powers is Haynes & Boone's managing partner, and in this role as chief executive, Tim chairs the firm's executive committee and board of directors and is responsible for developing and implementing the firm's strategy for achieving its goals and growth plans. Tim has been a longtime Haynes & Boone leader, holding numerous firm-wide roles. He has led the development of the firm's international practice, as well as its global geographic growth. In addition to his service as managing partner, Tim supports client matters in numerous ways and is widely credited with having led the legal development of the subscription secured credit facility market. In one of his more intriguing engagements, Tim represented the First National Bank of Whitewright in connection with the safe return of the Quedlinburg treasures to its German owners. In the book Treasure Hunt, the account of the theft label as one of the greatest and longest unsolved art thefts of the 20th century. Tim's greatest integrity in handling of the case is credited as a primary reason for the restoration of these medieval works of art to their rightful owners. In 2019, Tim was appointed by Mayor Eric Johnson to chair the City of Dallas Ethics Advisory Commission and was named the city's ethics reform czar, where he was tasked with overhauling the city's ethics code and establishing safeguards to ensure ethical behavior in government. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from UCLA, and we're honored to say is an alum of the Dedman School of Law, where he serves on the executive board. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Tim Powers. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. It's a real pleasure and an honor for me to be with you all today, and a privilege to share some of the things that I've learned over the last 40 years. And it's hard to believe that it's been 40 years since I graduated from law school, but to share just a little bit with you of my journey towards leadership, to see if it might be in some ways helpful to you. I'm gonna approach this in a way. I don't know that I'm necessarily professorial or a teacher at all, so I'm going to count on you for this to be an interactive session. If we can keep it as such, that's I think what I would like the most, and I think you might also be able to get the most out of it if we do it that way. I'm going to approach 6 topics with you today. One, just the leadership role of a lawyer in society, the leadership role of a lawyer in his or her practice and in business, leading lawyers and law firms and the challenges that are associated with that, leading in turbulent times, questioning why you want to be a leader, and then we'll finish off with what I believe are some of the most important leadership characteristics, or I've found them to be. And so, so when Eric and Andre and I went through a practice session yesterday, in doing that, we decided, that they will, if you want to ask questions via the chat box, feel free to do that. And they'll interrupt me as appropriate with the questions as you're raising them, or if you'll raise your hand or your hand flag or whatever on the Zoom feature, they will then let you interrupt, and I think that would probably work best. If no questions are raised, hopefully you will have some at the end, and we can go from there. So Eric, if it is okay, if I can, you're allowing me to share the screen now, I will do that, and we will go right into my slideshow related to this and start from the beginning. Okay, so as we focus on this, and the first topic to cover is the leadership role of a lawyer in society. And if you look basically historically, you see with the start of civil justice and civil statutory law, the Justinian Code, the Corpus Juris Civilis, which was developed by Justinian in 529, really ends up being the foundation for civil statutory law, civil behavior, and the rules and responsibilities that we and lawyers adhere to with regard to a civil society. And so historically, we go all the way back to 529 to start and see the role of lawyers in ensuring a focus on public interest and public good, and our responsibility to ensuring that we live in a civil society. You'll see the role that our country has deemed appropriate for our lawyers historically, that 25 of our presidents, inclusive of Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Lincoln, Franklin Roosevelt, were all lawyers. Many of you, I'm sure, have seen To Kill a Mockingbird, but it's been said that Atticus Finch has a vision of a lawyer, not only as a prophet, but also as a pastor, and understanding that role and what you are trying to do as a lawyer and role as a leader in that regard. Understanding that role that society looks to us to have is an important one for all of us, I think, to reflect on. It's said that Atticus's defense of Tom Robinson is based just not only on his innocence, but on fundamental equality, which again, I think our society expects from us. And that it's also been said with regard to Atticus that no real life lawyer has done more for the self-image or public perception of the legal profession than Atticus Finch. But that is one that, as you keep in mind of what, and what I'm trying to emphasize with here, is not necessarily someone who is out in front driving goals with respect to leadership, but someone who is out in front as viewed by society and people around him as always doing the right thing. And that perhaps is the most important goal that we should all have as leaders, as those looking to us as leadership can look at us and trust us as being focused on doing the right thing, ensuring justice and upholding the rule of law, equal access to justice, a basic principle of the rule of law, and that the rule of law is the foundation for a civil society, and it's a lawyer's duty to ensure that it's always upheld. I wanted to read from you an excerpt, if I could, from Joseph Raw's Law Day lecture in 1979 at the University of Minnesota School of Law, entitled A Public Interest Standard of Ethics for Lawyers. In it, Raw says, as a profession, lawyers are charged with a special responsibility. We're licensed to practice law because permitting us to do so serves the public interest. We're charged with the implementation and enforcement of the law of the land, and it's upon the successful execution of that charge that our democratic system ultimately rests. Over 30 years ago, so this was 79, so now we're talking over 70 years ago, Henry Stimson, one of the country's most distinguished lawyers, former Secretary of State, recognized the special responsibility of the bar to protect our civil freedoms and warned that we must learn from the experience of those in many countries possessing constitutions and bills of rights similar to our own, whose citizens had nevertheless lost their liberties because they did not possess a bar with sufficient courage and independence to establish and uphold those rights. Without a bar trained in the traditions of courage and loyalty, our constitutional theories of individual liberty would cease to be a living reality. So our profession stands in a unique position. It has a special duty to the people of this country, to the interests of the public at large, and ultimately to the preservation of our democratic system of government based on the rule of law. And so that is a mighty charge that not just the leaders in the profession have, but each of us as practicing lawyers have as a responsibility to our profession, as a responsibility to our society as a whole, that each of us individually, no matter our position in the bar, is charged to uphold. Much of that is focused on leading by example. People just naturally, you will find during your career that people will just naturally look to you and turn to you and have extremely high expectations of you, again, mainly focused on ensuring that we do the right thing and that we ensure that the right thing is done, especially with regard to upholding the rule of law and equal justice under the law. Much of that can be done by you setting the tone in all of your interactions with no matter who it is across the board, whether it's with your clients, whether it is with your fellow attorneys, or with regard to anyone and everyone that you come in contact with, that you are known for civility and for mutual respect, that you have respect for everyone that you're dealing with, because that attitude, with people looking at you from a leadership perspective, having that attitude will carry on and will allow, again, within our public interest and in society as a whole, will allow us as well to serve our communities well, to serve our clients well, and in many instances, our clients' success and the success of their businesses and the success of their cases in others that we are doing depend on us first and foremost having a civil society and upholding the rule of law within that civil society, and ensuring that in all of our interactions we are creating that respect. In times of crisis, much like we're living through right now, the calls on our profession are to be the calming wisdom in a time of crisis, and when change needs to be made, that we are known simply as people, as individuals, as a profession that will help get things done and will help get difficult things done. So that is whether you're ever in a leadership role within your company, your law firm, or civic organizations, or other things that you are involved with, your charge as a licensed lawyer, as a member of our bar, has a special role in society of you being a leader and an expectation of those who are around you that you are a leader. So that I think sets the foundation for our roles and responsibilities to society as a lawyer. Now, the next point is to look at the leadership role of a lawyer in practice and in business. This, Eric talked just a moment ago about the next program being about building your brand. This leadership role of a lawyer in practice and business is really what I will start as, what I would say, is the foundation of building your brand. First and foremost, integrity. Eric was kind enough to refer to my integrity being credited with the return of the Quedlinburg treasuries. That is nice. It's a direct quote out of a book, so it's very, very nice that it's specifically in that book. But perhaps Senator Alan Simpson from Wyoming said it the best when he said, if you have integrity, nothing else matters. And if you don't have integrity, nothing else matters. As a lawyer, your integrity is foundational to you. If you lose that integrity, or if you have a lapse in that integrity, it is immediately a loss of your reputation that you will perhaps work for the rest of your career to reestablish. But establishing that integrity and holding on and ensuring that in all of your interactions you have that integrity going forward will be the foundational basis of your ability to lead, because people will look to you and people will trust you for doing that. You also have from responsibility with regard to, again, the bar, and your responsibility as a lawyer is ensuring high ethical behavior. And you have the ability as the lawyer in a case or in a transaction that you have the ability to say no. You have the ability to say to your client, to the other side, in a very constructive manner, but set the tone very, very early on that you will not tolerate unethical behavior. Because if you set that standard immediately when you're starting a relationship with anybody, you will find that very few people will challenge that or try to cross it. You're going to be in a circumstance where you are setting the foundational basis for how the relationship, how the business, how the case, or everything else will proceed. Now, when your clients hire you, they are looking to you to be an independent thinker. And most importantly, you will find over your career that the reason that your clients hire you or return to you for additional work is for the good judgment that you have developed with regard to that. And being an independent thinker is focused more upon your ability to listen, your ability to be able to take multiple sides of an argument, and being able to develop it in a way, and through your using your good judgment or otherwise, but develop it in a way and present it in a way that can lead to a solution that everyone can live with. Again, and hopefully this is the last time I refer back to the Quedlinburg treasuries, but these were stolen art goods that had been sent back by a army soldier at the end of World War II. They had been sent back in a box, disguised as books, and they were treasuries that were valued somewhere in about the $150 million range at the time. And through a series of events, they ended up, the reason I was representing a bank in connection with this is they ended up as collateral for a loan that that had been under collateralized at the time, and the bank was looking for additional collateral. When the bounty hunters, for lack of a better term, the bounty hunters in the New York Times came looking for these treasuries, having thought that they had been able to trace them back to Whitewright, Texas. When they did that, the immediate thing that they did was to go into the bank and say, we believe we've got a claim to these, and we were called. Our firm was called to help the bank. They did not know what to do in this regard. And the thing that we did at the time, even though counsel, the usual outside counsel for the bank, had said, immediately get rid of that stuff, send it back to the family. Our response to them was, somebody has what may be a viable claim. We need to hold on to it. You need to hold on to it till that claim is resolved. But again, the whole point there, and I'm just using as an example, was that we set immediately at the beginning of a relationship how this transaction, how this negotiation was going to proceed, and it was always going to proceed above board. There is an ability that you have with your client to continue to zealously represent your client and balance, again, using that example, fair play with having a reputation for always doing the right thing. And always, much as I've said earlier, with regard to our overall role in society, always showing respect and civility for your adversary, whether they be your legal adversary or the attorney on the other side. And understanding, and this is an interesting thing that I've had discussions with several of our younger generation and having discussions that somehow or other compromise in negotiation may cause you to lose your integrity. And that's not really the case, because going back, being that independent thinker, having good judgment, getting to yes, creating a win-win situation for everyone does not require a loss of integrity. It gets you to a result, and you've been in a position because of how you have handled the matter and how you have led that transaction that allows you to get to a result that everybody's happy with. For those of you that may have been involved in negotiations in the past, or may have been involved in court cases in the past where everything didn't turn out like you thought they would, many times what you have is a negotiation where not everybody gets what they want. And so based on that, everyone ultimately comes to the conclusion that that it was a fair result for everybody, because neither side got exactly what they wanted. But you can still represent your client very zealously and still maintain that reputation of fair play, reputation for always doing the right thing, and still come to a compromise and an agreed resolution that ends up being a win for your client, that ends up being a win for the other side. Your ability to win for your client doesn't necessarily mean you're dealing with a zero-sum game in circumstances. And being able to lead clients sometimes to decisions that they don't want to take or don't, or feel are unfair, but as you, in using your independent thought process and judgment, are able to guide them in a way that ultimately gets to a resolution, is another way that you're exhibiting leadership in your role in practice or in business on a daily basis. So Eric, should I stop there? Are there any questions before we go on to the next topic that are coming up yet?
Let's see if there are questions from the audience. You can put them in the chat, or you can just ask them directly.
All right. I'll just assume everyone's just mesmerized by all of this, and we will continue to go on. Okay. Going to our third point then. So leading lawyers and leading law firms. This is a very interesting, and those of you, and I understand we have some people from the business school as well, but particularly for those of you that are in law school and you know your own personality and you know the personality traits of your classmates. One of the very interesting things that someone learns in a law firm or in the practice of law is that when you're running a law firm, there is no chain of command. This isn't like a military operation. This isn't like a business operation where you have a CEO who makes an ultimate decision, and once that decision's made, you go down through the chain of command and everyone falls in line. You will find over your career in working in a law firm or in working in a law department or otherwise that the general counsel, the managing partner, the chairman of the firm has to build a consensus in order to be able to lead. That those that are around you, particularly what I would say in a law firm, you have those that are around you that are your colleagues, your partners, your associates within the firm, all of whom are those great independent thinkers that I referred to earlier, but all of whom do believe that they don't need to be led and they don't like to be led. And they absolutely don't like to be told what to do. And the interesting thing that you've got with regard to that, and perhaps even though he is a former president and a great military general, it was Dwight Eisenhower who said, "Now I think speaking roughly by leadership, we mean the art of getting someone else to do something that you want done because he wants to do it, not because of your position of power or authority that can compel him to do it." And that is probably the perfect refrain to dealing with lawyers in law firms or legal departments or otherwise, because it is through your ability to build consensus, through your ability to achieve something that you want to get done, needing to be the idea of that lawyer that you are working with, is probably the epitome of leadership in a law firm. And it's an interesting characteristic, because at the same time, while lawyers don't like to be led, they want a good leader that they trust and admire. So they want to have somebody, whether that person's in my role as a managing partner or a general counsel, they want to have somebody not only that they look to and admire for leadership, but is perceived by the outside perceived outside of the organization as a great leader as well. Though that lawyer, that is the leader or the named leader, has to have enough emotional intelligence and enough humility to understand that every lawyer that is around them, particularly their partners, believe they are owners of the organization, which in fact that they are. And because they are owners of the organization, they have the right to challenge anything you say. And the other thing that you need to understand, and again, have the humility to understand, is each of your partners also believes that they would be a better managing partner or chairman than you would ever be, no matter how well you do. And so if you understand that about your colleagues in the firm, and this starts, as those of you that are joining law firms or joining legal departments, this starts on the day that you come to your summer associate program, the day that you start with the law firm. You're building that trust and you're building that level of being able to build consensus from those around you. From the day that you start in the firm, because you are starting to build your reputationally within the firm or within the organization. And in doing that, you have to have a keen sense of diplomacy and a keen sense of being able to cajole without at the same time whomever it is that you're trying to cajole feels that they in fact are being treated that way or being led that way. So it's a very flat organization, and it's why you see so many lawyers in positions of diplomacy, whether it be again a Secretary of State or anyone from a negotiation perspective, because you're in a circumstance where lawyers have had to develop in their leadership this innate ability to build consensus. Now, you're doing all of that in a way. You're doing all of that in a way that you still have to be a leader. You just have to understand who it is that you are trying to lead at the time. It still requires you to have, as a leader, the conviction and the confidence in what you want to do and the courage to carry it out. So you have to have those characteristics. You have to also have, from a leadership perspective, have the imagination and have the vision that you can create a common vision for people to follow. But as you start in the profession, as you start in your practice, in your firm, in your company, in any community or civic thing that you're involved in, you're starting to earn that respect and trust from the day that you start. It's not one day that you walk in and somebody has anointed you to become a leader, but you're developing those leadership skills on a daily basis. And in doing that, you're doing it in a way that takes, and look, I was at Haynes. I've been at Haynes and Boone now almost 40 years, and I did not become the managing partner until I have been here for 34 years. So I'm not saying that it will take the next person 34 years to get to the particular point that I am at right now, but it takes your career to develop the level of respect that you will need and the level of trust in particularly that you will need from your peers in order to be able to listen them, in order to be able to lead them. The next characteristic that I would say that you would be looking at is one that you have to listen. You have to be open-minded. While you have to have courage and conviction and confidence in what you do, and certainly you never want to see those that you lead seem like you are doubting that. You always need to be listening and open to the possibility that there could be some type of change that you need to make in order to build the consensus that you need in order to get the results that you want to need, that you want to achieve. You earn that, going back to the respect side of things, the respect and trust. Much of that trust is built over your peers looking at you through a lens of the level of commitment you have and the level of hard work that you're able to to show throughout your career, and a belief from your peers that you are always focused on the greater good rather than on your personal benefit. I think for anyone to be a successful leader, they have to be perceived by those that they want to lead and need to lead as being an individual that is focused on the greater good rather than on the personal benefit of the particular leader that we're talking about. We've talked about building consensus and how important that is. Seizing opportunities is another way that you need to lead, particularly in a law firm. Oftentimes you may have ideas with regard to direction you want to go, things you want to achieve, and things will get in the way. We've lived this year through an economic crisis, a crisis in the energy industry, a crisis through a pandemic, and a crisis through the issues that we have had, the social issues that we have had with respect to racism this year. A year of challenges with regard to this, but you need to be able to seize opportunities and lead in circumstances when those things present themselves. I think these opportunities are going to come when you least expect them. They're not going to come when it's convenient to you. They're not necessarily ever going to come according to your plan. But if you don't have a plan and you don't work hard and you don't know how you're going to respond when you have that opportunity presented, you're not going to be able to lead and you're not going to be able to seize that opportunity. I've talked about a little bit earlier about creating a shared vision. A lot of that has to do with having a vision and having imagination of what you want to achieve through your leadership, the goals that you want to set for your organization and how you want to get there. In order for you to be able to do that, though, you have to have the courage and conviction and confidence, and people have to believe in that level of confidence. People don't want to see you doubting yourself with regard to the direction that you want to lead that organization. And you'll be able to, in creating that vision, if you've earned the respect and trust of those that are around you, if you've listened to them and you've built the consensus that's necessary, you're able to create a shared vision for the future of your organization that you can continue to focus on and return to as you're trying to get people to follow.
Tim, this is
Yeah.
Eric. We had one question, and it, sorry to make you go back a little bit, but it really relates to representing your client zealously.
Uh-huh.
And the question basically is this: is considering that there's a dire desire to always zealously represent your client and the internal competitiveness that many lawyers have, how should we best make ourselves aware of when our zealous representation and desire to compete and win is going too far? And I would add, just from my own experience, this could be in the context of a negotiation of a deal or something like that, right? And this also applies to the current slide, considering the competitiveness amongst associates and partners within a firm.
A great question, and some of that is a good sense of emotional intelligence that you have to have, and it has to be emotional intelligence about yourself and about who you are as a competitor and as a zealous advocate, understanding your strengths and understanding your weaknesses, so studying yourself in that regard, but also being well prepared as you go into any kind of negotiation or any kind of courtroom situation where you are prepared and you know where it is that you want want to get at the end of the day, and what it will take to get there. And so understanding what your goals are at the end of the day, and a bit in some ways like playing chess, you are always strategically moving forward to get to the result that you desire for your client, but at the same time have to have the emotional intelligence to be able to read the circumstance, to be able to read the negotiation, to be able to respond to judicial rulings and otherwise that you may have in the courtroom. That you need to be able, again, to be that quick thinker, understand what your long-term goal is for your client, and then be able to guide towards that. But so much of crossing that line has to do with an understanding of your own emotional intelligence and your ability to master that. But at the same time, always starting with, and I would say, that level of mutual respect that you're dealing with, whether it's for your client, for the circumstance, for your adversary, or for the party that is on the other side. Understanding that whatever negotiation or dispute that you're in, they have a position that they believe in as strongly as you believe in. And so much of leadership in this regard is being able to get you to that yes that will bring a conclusion either to the deal or the case that you're working with. But so much of that, and you're going to develop that over time. This isn't something that you start day one, and you've got a perfect sense of what your negotiation style is or otherwise. I would say to you, it also starts coming back to the whole idea of mutual respect, is that you always want to treat others exactly like you would want to be treated in the circumstance. And so many times, and I'll go into negotiation and zealously representing your clients, and I've found myself in these circumstances on each side of this equation. There are times when you have an advocate that's on the other side, your adversary that you're dealing with, that you realize they're making a mistake. And you could take advantage of their having made a particular mistake at a time that could be disastrous for them and disastrous for their client, but you know is unintentional on their part. And the question becomes at that point in time, do you take advantage of that and go for the kill, or do you in that circumstance treat that person like you would expect to be treated or want to be treated, and have someone point out to you at that point in time, perhaps you really didn't mean that, perhaps that isn't exactly what you want to do, or pointing out to them discreetly that what they're about to do could cause a tremendous problem. Again, that doesn't mean you're compromising. That doesn't mean you're not zealously advocating for your client, but you're also, again, building the reputation that you have yourself as a lawyer, but also with regard to the client that you're representing, that they are always working and living above board with regard to their business interactions, and that's going to be the standard with how you set things. And so I don't know if that answers the question directly, but a lot of it is self-introspection and self-knowledge that you would want to have, that you are that you're following. Eric, that good there?
Very good, thank you.
Okay. So just continuing on with the leaders of lawyers and law firms, you're also wanting within your organization to establish a strong and cohesive culture. And in creating that culture, and the one that I live with and am part of and have been successful with because of my historical background, is a very team-focused, team-oriented culture where we are working together to serve our clients and serve them well, but we are working well with each other to achieve the results for our clients. It creates a great environment that you're working with, you're playing to each other's strengths, but what you're doing with regard to the culture that you've established is that you are, particularly in this teamwork environment, you've created a cohesiveness among the team in working together, and a cohesiveness where your team members don't doubt where you're going and what you're doing. The same that you're doing with regard to leading and what characteristics that you're looking at is in leading a firm that your lawyers believe that that they are very independent, again, they don't want to be led or don't want to be told what to do, but they want to be part of a great organization. You have to do several things as a leader as part of creating this shared vision for a firm. A big part of that will be the culture that you establish or that you build on, that you've already been part of. But a big part of that, at the same time as you're building this shared vision for the future and you've established this cohesive culture that people want to be part of, what you've been able to do is to infuse into the minds and the hearts of those that you're trying to lead. You've basically been able to infuse into them a sense of purpose with regard to that vision that you have, meaning for them with regard to what they're being asked to do or what they want to be part of. And again, creating, as you do, a sense of purpose in the individuals that you're trying to lead and establishing meaning in their life, that they're following that vision that you've created. It's become a shared vision that they're part of, and you're bound together by that strong culture. You're looking at it from a standpoint as well that that those that you're trying to lead are looking to you not just for, again, not just for that particular moment in time, but you're looking at the long term. You're building a culture that looks at the long term. You're focused on the stewardship of the overall organization. There's a sense of the individual that you're trying to lead, that you're focused on the greater good, that you will be a good steward for your organization, that your organization will not live and die by what goes on the next day, but that it has a long-term strategy, a long-term vision. It has the resilience to withstand a crisis like the one that we're going through right now, and a belief, therefore, of those that you are trying to lead, that you are a good steward, and you will always focus on the greater good of the organization over any individuals, or especially your own best interest. Oftentimes as well, those that you are leading will want to know that you are decisive and that you will take action when action needs to be taken. That next point that I'm focused on there of acting short term, but always thinking long term. And when I talk about always thinking long term, you have established for the organization as a leader certain goals. You've created this shared vision. Are the things that you're doing always driving you to achieve those long-term goals? Are the decisions that you are making now still focused on the long term? To be a great leader and a leader that people will want to follow, they want to know foundationally that how you're going to act, even in the time of a crisis, how you're going to act is going to be consistent, and you're creating the stability because they know how it is that your organization will react. And the things that you do short term in response to those crises will be consistent with your organization's culture, and they will be consistent with the core values that you've established as a leader for your organization. All of this comes about through your career, and particularly as a leader, through communication. And you cannot communicate enough. So much, and I'll say this, and again, I know we've got a little bit of a mixed audience here, but with regard to the lawyers in the audience, so much as much as I'll say to you non-lawyers that you may believe that lawyers are as tough as can be, and they're as resilient as can be, and the greatest advocates ever. A lawyer's personality, you will learn over a period of time, is a very, very fragile one. And your ability to communicate with that lawyer and stay in communication with them, and it's not by email, it's not by text, it's not by WhatsApp, it is communication that you are having that is live communication. One of the things that I do here at Haynes & Boone, we have 18 offices throughout the firm. Up until March 9th of this year, I was traveling about 300,000 miles a year, much of it in between our offices, meeting with our lawyers, because so much of the lawyer sensibility and personality and character is the need of a feeling of importance. And when they see their leader in their office with them, when they hear that leader interacting with them, or taking the time to meet with them, even if it's just to say hello, it reestablishes in their mind that they are important. It also reestablishes for them that sense of meaning, that sense of purpose that they need, that lawyers as a special type of personality really and truly need to have fulfilled within them. And so you are feeding, whether you want to call it an ego, whether you want to call it the special characteristics of a lawyer, you're really focusing on, in many ways, through that communication, constantly reinforcing the need for the need that lawyers have to be told in many instances that they are important, and fulfilling sometimes some of the self-doubt that they have by being able to lead them in a way that continues to reaffirm their importance to the organization, their importance to the profession, their importance to their clients, and the like. Stop there, Eric, for a moment for
Sure. Let's open it to any questions. I have one actually, as you're speaking about communication. Obviously people that are in law school now or in business school interact in a different way that is more digital and more remote and really less face-to-face. And there are different approaches for sure. So what would you recommend to our students to be able to balance that when it comes to interacting with people? You expressed the preference, and I think a recommendation almost to get in contact with people directly face-to-face rather than relying on technology.
Well, I think it's a combination of everything. I think the one thing that I would emphasize is that you can't lose the personal touch. You can still have all of the levels of communication that you're interacting with your peers and colleagues now, but it can never, ultimately at the end of the day, particularly with regard to the lawyer's personality, it can never replace that personal interaction. Again, and it's a feeling of belonging. It's a feeling of importance that the lawyer needs to have. And I constantly referring to lawyers, but I think this is just human nature. Everyone wants to be validated. And it is oftentimes that personal touch that provides that validation. Sometimes that personal touch can come through a handwritten note. Sometimes it can come through an email that's just at the right time because somebody needs to be encouraged. Sometimes it's a personal call. Sometimes it's when we're back in our offices now, or at least a group of us are back in our offices now, but we're still very much working virtually. And as we started our remote work, and we were very, very fortunate to have a very robust remote platform that everyone was able to work from seamlessly. While we had all that, as a leader, you could sense how important it was that you still brought everybody together, and how important it was because we were in such a new setting that it was important to communicate with them every day and communicate with them in a personal way. So at the end of the day, every day for the first 8 weeks that we were in our remote setting, I spent time updating everybody with, let us tell you what's going on with the firm. Let us tell you what's going on with a lot of the things that we're looking at. Want you to know, here's what's going on with some of our client things. Here's what's going on with our remote setup. Here's what's going on. Just a lot of information that came out every day. But at the end, there was always some level of encouragement that you were trying to tell people, we're in this together. We're going to get through this. You're in essence, as a leader, you're in that circumstance wherever you are, you're trying to communicate that we're in this together. We're going to come together. We're going to be okay when we get through this. And as a leader, going back to that courage, conviction, and confidence, you may have no idea whether you're going to be able to get it. You have no idea how you're going to do it, but you still have to instill in the minds of those that you're charged with leading that sense, that sense of confidence that you're going to get, that we're all going to get through this together. And so a lot of it, I would send quotes or other things at the end of each message that was encouragement, that was about resilience, that was about other examples of things that others had done that people could follow. But it was a sense, again, that you were trying to get everybody together in a sense of personal belonging. And it became important and kind of leads to this next topic that we're looking at with regard to leadership in turbulent times. Because whether you use that as the name of the book that Doris Kearns Goodwin did when she wrote of Lincoln and the two Roosevelts and Lyndon Johnson, and the things that they did to lead the United States through the turbulent times when they were the leaders, or whether you're talking about the last 6 months that we have all lived through together. The leadership in turbulent times is when your character, when you're tested most and your character appears. There's a quote that David Brooks has said in his book, The Road to Character, that character development, like historic progress, best happens imperceptibly through daily efforts. And so that is, again, as you all get ready to start your careers, you are starting to build that view of others, that view that others will have of your character on a daily basis. And it's evolving on that daily basis, and it's being built on a daily basis. And it's that credibility that you have when you're thrown into this circumstance that we're in right now, which was everybody has to go immediately to a remote setting, or when you're in a business crisis, that the energy crisis that we're in right now from a business perspective, or whether we're in the social crisis that we find ourselves in right now, that it is these times when we are tested that our character comes out the most. It is in these times that a leader then has to be the calm and the trusted voice in the storm, has to be trusted that whatever we're doing is focused on the long term, even though we're taking some short-term actions. There has to be a belief in a trust that you're focused on the greater good. There has to be a belief and trust in you as a leader that you have the demeanor, the ability, and the stability to lead through and be that calm and trusted voice in a storm. You've earned that over a period of time. And so you're not always going to be in a crisis circumstance. There are going to be some great times when the firm's doing extremely well. And there are going to be times like we're dealing with right now where you're in a crisis and you are, and I'm not doing a very good job of, here we go, moving forward with my PowerPoint presentation. There we go. So it's being that calm voice in a storm, but going back Eric, to answer your question of the communication side of things, it's constantly being in communication with those that you're leading, particularly in a time of crisis, being understood to be with regard to the communications that you're having, that communication is truthful, that it's transparent, that you're not hiding the ball, that you're being clear and wise with others, and you are doing it in a way that's providing inspiration as well. And as you look back over time with regard to things and upholding the culture and core values of your organization, you need, as a leader, as you're making short-term decisions with regard to this particular crisis you're dealing with, you need to be able to see on the other side of the crisis, that when after the crisis is over, will you look back and say, as a leader, I have upheld the core values and the culture of our organization. And that is a real test of a leader when that leader is trying to deal with the daily crisis that's thrown at them. Now, all of that, of being able to be the calm voice that people will respond to, that you can provide the inspiration that people will respond to, and that people will trust the judgment and the actions that you're taking. You're able to do that as a leader because over a period of time, you have been able to build a level of trust, and that in these times of crises, you are relying on the trust that's been built over time in order to have people follow you, believe what you're doing is in the best interest of the organization, and come together to work together to work through a crisis. So you're doing at the same time, while you're doing all of that, and some of that while you may have self-doubt in yourself, you are motivating others and trying to inspire others to do that. As I mentioned earlier, you're upholding the culture and core values of your organization in all you're doing, and people believe that you are always focused on the greater good. You're communicating with them so they feel this sense of connectiveness, and you're in constant contact with them in multiple ways. I asked rhetorically the last question of what happens if there's a vacuum in leadership in a crisis. I think many of you have probably seen, for things that you're involved in or otherwise throughout our world, what happens when there is a vacuum in leadership, and whether that's in a business, whether that's in a government, whether that's in society at large, you're ending up with finding yourself in a crisis or chaotic circumstance. So those are some of the characteristics that I guess I would say in leading the organization, your responsibility in the practice of law and representing your clients. And I would also say that would be things that you're looking at as well for how you would deal with crisis circumstances. You need to, though, for yourself, wanting to be a leader, understanding you've got a certain responsibility as a leader, but particularly in those circumstances where you want to be a leader of the organization, you need to reflect yourself, and you need to understand what your personal motivations are for why you want to be a leader. And interesting, and you see, I keep I keep not flipping those slides. Sorry about that. We've talked about a leader, in order to inspire people and get people to follow them, has to have vision and imagination. People need to believe that you are taking them to a higher level. You're taking them to new heights in an organization, and you're sharing that vision with them. Excuse me, and they become a part of that. But you need to understand what your personal motivations are. Why do you want to lead? Do you just want the title? Or are you more in a circumstance, which I believe has to be the key of every great leader? And that is truly understanding that a great leader has a responsibility of servant leadership, that you're really, as a leader, you're more there as a servant to drive your organization and inspire those that are around you to greatness than you are to be lauded as a great leader. And I think that that's true whether you're leading a law firm, whether you're leading a civic organization, whether you're a great military leader, or whether you're a political leader. I loved what Lincoln said when questioned, and this was when he originally ran for Congress, and lost several times before becoming before getting to the point of the presidency. But his desire was to be truly esteemed by his fellow man by rendering himself worthy of their esteem. And I think that as you focus on your role and responsibility as a leader and as a servant leader in particular, that esteem is earned because of what you've been able to achieve through other people and not necessarily what you've done individually on your own. Now, I will also say, and I think that this holds for me as well, and I've had these discussions with Eric, going back to Doris Kearns Goodwin book on leadership in turbulent times, the one commonality that Goodwin pointed out in the book was each of these individuals, be it Franklin Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, or Lyndon Johnson, each of those individuals had a conviction at an early time in their life that they were born for something more important. And being born for and believing that you are born for something more important, I think tends to get you focused from a leadership perspective on the role and responsibility of a leader and what you might be able to do. If you believe that you're born for important things, you work on developing that vision and imagination. But you understand more than anything that you, in order to lead others, you have to work hard. You have to constantly self-improve. You have to be devoted to principles, and you have to be focused on the greater good rather than your own. And a character and integrity that you have, that you've developed over time when you're stepping into these leadership roles, can provide that foundation for your leadership style. I think what I've learned most importantly over the years, and some of this is the benefit of both having worked around and led lawyers, but perhaps also having two daughters, is the adoption early on of a humility code, and understanding, most importantly, that humility is a virtue, and that you cannot, whether you're the greatest leader that ever has lived, you cannot do it alone, and you need a team around you. So that's my background with regard to the first 5 topics in this last of understanding why you want a leader. I'm going to share with you now some characteristics that I believe are important leadership characteristics. They are not exclusive, and they are not exhaustive. They're what I think and what I would recommend to you as things that you should think about if in fact you have a desire to be a leader. And they are things that I would point out to you that you should be thinking about, because particularly for those of you that are lawyers in the audience here today, because society has a belief in you that you will be a leader. So with all of that, let me roll out some things for you then. First and foremost, I think you need to understand that leadership is a lifelong journey, that you need to be a student of leadership, and that you need to be a student of leaders, that you need to study leaders that you admire, both historical and current day. And I would say broadly study them from the perspective of not just leaders here in the United States or otherwise, or not just lawyer leaders or otherwise. Study other leaders and what made them successful and what they were able to do to motivate and inspire others. And that's not just looking historically at things, though. And I was a political science major, so you see much of what I've focused on in our discussion here today as related to political leaders. But you can look at, and I have studied military leaders throughout the year, and I've studied current day leaders as you're looking at, be it a Jeff Bezos, be it a Steve Jobs, be it a Steven Schwartzman, or others that have built great organizations. What is it that they've done? What is it that, for example, that we would know in our backyard that has been done at Southwest Airlines to build such a great culture in an organization? Why was that? And why was that feeling within the Southwest organization of being very much a part of creating meaning in that organization and a sense of belonging that really has established and solidified that culture? I would seek throughout mentors that you admire. Look at people. Don't hesitate to reach out to them and have discussions with them. But don't also not have mentors that you are talking with, asking questions about, asking how they would respond to things, and as well. I think you need to know that you're always being watched. This goes back from the first thing that I mentioned. You as a lawyer in your role in society, no matter what you do, whether it's the morning after the night you didn't get a lot of sleep and you feel like you're out on the street and nobody's looking at you at all, somebody's always watching you. And somebody's always watching whether you're exemplifying your core values in all that you do. And so you've got to understand, again, as a lawyer, that people are looking at you all of the time. And people, and particularly when you get in your leadership positions, people are looking at you all of the time. And I'll give you an interesting example. When I became the managing partner of the firm, one of the better pieces of advice I got was from a consultant who said, you need to make sure from the time that you step out of your car to, well, this could be if you're commuting or otherwise, but basically the time that you start to make your move to the office, that you need to smile, say hello, interact with the people that you've seen on a daily basis. No matter what you have on your mind, you need to be able to have an interaction with them that is what they expect to receive. Because if that interaction's different, if you have a worried look on your face, they will have a worried look on your face. If you greet them well and say hello to them and you notice them, you could be making their day. And you need to understand that. And you need to understand you're always being asked, or you're always being watched. I'm sorry. And then you have a responsibility as you move up into leadership positions, you have a responsibility to mentor those that follow you. As I talked before, of being a student of leadership, you need to always have a curious mind and a listening ear with what you're trying to develop. I've started off with integrity. I'll continue it here. Going back to the Alan Simpson quote, if you have it, nothing else matters. If you don't have it, nothing else matters. And so needing to understand that foundationally is all you need. It's not all you need, but is the foundation of what you need. That there's no substitute for hard work. And you have to have an ability and an ambition to seize opportunities when they present themselves. You have to have to lead well, you have to have a single-mindedness and a selfless dedication to the task at hand, and always focusing on the greater good, that the cause must predominate over self. You have to have courage and conviction in the direction that you're trying to lead, because if you don't have it, those that you're trying to lead will certainly not have it, and certainly will not believe in you. And I think something that you need to think about that may not be a natural thing for you to reflect on, but is important for you to understand, is that you have to care for and care about those that you lead. again, going back to the whole idea of emotional intelligence, you are focusing on the success of others and not just on your own success. And you have to know when you're interacting with those that you're leading, that they're coming to you no matter how genuine their request is, and no matter how much of a conviction they have to what they're bringing to you. Having that keen eye and keen ear to understand that they've got their own agenda, and having the emotional intelligence to understand what that agenda is, and yet still have those that are coming to you and those that you lead truly believe that you care about them, and you truly can only care about them if in fact you do care about them. It cannot be a lip service that you give or otherwise. People have to see it in how you interact with them and see it in your actions. They have to believe that you'll listen to them. They have to believe that you have empathy and compassion for them. And that is how, at the end of the day, you will earn their trust.
Tim,
I will go back again to my early talk about teamwork. I was a rower in college, and it probably set the foundation. Many of you, perhaps, hopefully all of you at some point in time have read the book, The Boys in the Boat. But the idea of teamwork and the idea of crew and rowing, called the epitome of a sport, is understanding that you are only as strong as your weakest link, and understanding that your personal success is dependent on the team, and understanding and driving that the organization is stronger together than anybody acting alone. So being able to instill and enforce that teamwork as part of your core culture has a great level of importance, and will be directly driven on your ability to succeed as an organization, because a team will always outperform the individual.
Tim, we have a question from the chat feature. How do you know when an opportunity is the correct one to seize? And how do you go about seizing the opportunity?
Well, I don't know that there is going to be a perfect answer for knowing the opportunity to seize. I think you develop judgment over a period of time, but you're looking at certain circumstances as to where in the circumstance of as a leader of your particular ambition, not just for yourself, but for the organization overall. And in finding that opportunity, being able or having that opportunity presented to you, having prepared yourself well enough to know whether that opportunity that's being presented in fact does help you achieve the longer term goals that you've set for the organization. So you've as a leader, you've developed this strategy, you've developed what you want to achieve, and thus being able to look at the opportunity that's been presented to yourself and weigh it against those principles that you set for yourself, I think give you the sense of whether this is the right opportunity. I will say, at least this has been my own experience, I would say that the opportunities arise when you least expect them. The opportunities arise when they're least convenient, and you cannot plan for them. You could say, well, come back the Thursday after next Tuesday, or whatever else like that. It is one of those where you have to seize it when presented, but you have to have been prepared enough to recognize that in fact it's the opportunity that you're weighing it against. And so it is I would say it's judgment developed over time, but it's judgment because of the hard work that you've done, and because you're looking at it from a long-term perspective, that I think that you're looking to seize that opportunity. There could be other things that arise. They could be specific leadership opportunities that you're looking at, that one is presented to you, and even though it may cause you to have to, burn the candle from both ends, that in order to take advantage of what you have been offered, um, you need to do it, or you have a certain sense of responsibility. And I'll give you this action. The last thing in the world that I really thought that I should be doing in light of my responsibilities to the law firm and the other things that I've been involved with throughout the world and throughout our community, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was to be the ethics reform czar for the city of Dallas in a time when we had council members going to jail for fraud and misuse of public funds and other things like that. But I recognized two things at that time as the mayor sat down and asked me to do that. One of which is I recognized that it was important for our community, that the mayor really believed in it. It was important for our community to help bring these reforms, and that it was the right thing to do. So sometimes seizing that opportunity, as inconvenient as it was, that it's the right thing to do and it's the responsible thing to do. So sometimes you're looking and seizing those opportunities when you least want them or least expect them, but you do them because you know they're the right thing to do. Continuing on, I'll get here, and I know we're getting close to the end of time, and I want to finish if I can. The interesting thing as a leader, particularly a leader of lawyers, of having an irrational sense of hope, is that lawyers' personalities are ones to question, ones to doubt, ones to criticize. And that's what makes them great lawyers. They are questioning of everything. And you have to have, as a leader of lawyers, you have to have an irrational sense of hope that you can bring them to that level at some point in time. Because if you don't have that irrational sense of hope, you will never be able to bring that personality of self-doubt, of criticism and questioning to the level that you need to be to achieve the success that you want to achieve. Cultivating resilience. This is something that I'll talk about. Many of you who maybe have heard me in the Inns of Courts meetings that we've had. So much of you getting through law school is resilience. So much of it, just this capacity for stress-related growth. You have to be able to accept criticism, especially from lawyers. It is their nature to criticize. You have to be pretty thick-skinned in that regard. And I would also say, in cultivating this resilience, if you have never failed, you have not tried hard enough. And that you understanding, again, with regard to that capacity for stress-related growth, that the effect of adversity on the growth of your leadership, character, and style is the best learning tool that you can have. The ability also, once you have been knocked down. I don't know if it was Vince Lombardi or others who've said, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times you get back up. The capacity to admit error and to learn from it, the capacity to sustain your ambition when you're getting knocked down in that face of frustration is perhaps the highest level of resilience that you need to have as a lawyer. A couple of last things, discipline in being a lawyer. And I talk about training mentally and physically. It oftentimes being at the top is a very lonely role, and you need to have the physical stamina to do it. You need to have the mental stamina to do it. And it's something to start to train in early on. Being physically in good shape to handle the type of stress that you're going to deal as a leader becomes incredibly important. Being mentally stable to be able to do that as well. Having that discipline, working on that discipline throughout your career is important. The ability to build relationships. I talk so much about, admiring government, lawyer leaders. Lincoln is one of those with me. And you noticed as he came in as president, and if you've read the book Team of Rivals, another Doris Kearns Goodwin book, but if you read that, you saw that he brought into his cabinet all of those people who ran against him for president. He brought them in. He didn't surround himself with like people. He didn't surround himself with people that were always going to say yes. He surrounded himself with people that would challenge him. He had an open-mindedness to listen to different viewpoints, even though he knew where he wanted to go, he was open to change. And he knew if he listened to others and was able to build a consensus within all of those different viewpoints, that he would be able to lead the country well in that instance. Again, going back, you've heard me say this 4 or 5 times already, how important communication is. Providing inspiration, providing persuasion, providing influence, but providing that personal touch as well becomes important. I think you also want to be that leader who does have a sense of humor, who is self-deprecating. Again, going back to that humility code that you have, the ability to have a sense of humor in light of everything, to be able to drop a joke when everybody least expects it, to lighten the air becomes very, very important. And having that sense of humor and being that sense of fun that people thought of you before you became the CEO or the managing partner or the chairman, I think becomes very, very important. Again, I'll finish up with just a couple of things that humility and having that humility code, you have to understand perhaps is your most important characteristic as a leader, that you have to understand that you're not the center of the universe, and as a leader, you serve a larger order. Recognize the importance of shared leadership, that you're giving credit to others for successes, but you're empowering others to lead, that you have confidence enough in your leadership style and confidence enough in those that you have selected to work with you in other leadership roles to allow them to lead as well and to lead them to lead as well. So a couple of last things that I would leave you with is that particularly leading lawyers, you have to have that heart of a lawyer and you have to have a skin of a rhinoceros. You have to have the heart of a lawyer. You have to have the heart of a lion and the skin of a rhinoceros. And that is because your heart needs to be so big of what you're trying to achieve and trying to inspire others to get to, that others have to look at that and believe themselves. And then the skin of a rhinoceros is the ability to take anybody's criticism, to get knocked down and have the resilience to get up. So much of that is built on having an attitude of gratitude, your ability to understand that practicing gratitude in all that you do is that you can't thank others enough for what they have done to contribute to the organization. And gratitude, as again David Brooks has said, fills the soul, and with it the desire to serve and to give back. And so as I will leave you with this, and then leave 5 minutes for questions as I see it, as a leader, the person that you want to be looked at is you want to be looked at a person who is living, so that when other people think of integrity, enthusiasm, commitment, and caring, they think of you. So Eric, I leave it with that. Hope that was helpful. I know we said there's no possible way that I could talk for an hour and a half, but I've somehow managed to do that. I will tell you that all of my colleagues here at Haynes and Boone would have told you, give him any amount of time at all and he'll take more than that. So, but we do have a few more minutes, and I can, as I said yesterday, I can stay around for a couple minutes if people as well want to ask questions or follow up with emails, or otherwise I'm happy to answer those questions.
That's great. We do have one question, and then I'll let people chime in after that. So you mentioned a couple of books. You talked about the ones by David Brooks and also Doris Kearns Goodwin. What are some other books on leadership that you would recommend to our students?
Well, again, and this is just me. I have, particularly, again, I'm fond of Thomas Jefferson, and I've read John Meacham's book, The Art of Power, which talks about the development of leadership and influence, which I found very, very, very helpful. Talked about Goodwin's book, Team of Rivals, Goodwin's book, The Leadership in Turbulent Times. On Franklin Roosevelt, H.W. Brands wrote a book, Traitor to His Class, which talked an awful lot about all the things that happened to Roosevelt over his life that developed his leadership style. David Brooks' book on the road to character is, for me, was exceptionally good on self-reflection to your own character and your leadership style. Rob Kaplan, the president of our Federal Reserve Bank here, who's a former Harvard Business School professor, wrote a book, What You Really Need to Lead. There is a book that was written called How Democracies Die. And I think what was important to me in this is understanding, going back to the quotes that I gave you all from Joseph Raw regarding the responsibilities of a lawyer to society. If you read that book by Levitsky and Zablat on how democracies die, it will further charge you with the responsibility that you have as a lawyer to uphold the rule of law. Robert's book on Churchill is my favorite on Churchill thus far, though his granddaughter, Sandys, S-A-N-D-Y-S, wrote a book, We Shall Not Fail, The Inspiring Leadership of Winston Churchill. Nigel Hamilton wrote a book on FDR called Mantle of Command that talked more of FDR's leadership. Seth Davis wrote a book on John Wooden. I was at UCLA when John Wooden was the coach, called A Coach's Life. Talks a lot about his pyramid of success and his leadership style. And finally, you heard me talk about emotional intelligence, and I think the dispositive work, or at least the early work on emotional intelligence, was written by an author named Coleman, and it's the book that I've always referred to as a source book on emotional intelligence. So, and I can send you that list if people want to see that.
Sure,
if you want to send that out with a.
Helpful.
But
other questions.
I think it's 1:30 and the group's ready to roll.
What we'll say here is those that need to drop off, please feel free to. Tim has a few moments longer, so we can continue with the questions. We have a question that says, when you are making leadership decisions in turbulent and unprecedented times, what are the most important considerations to take into account in determining what is best for your organization?
What are the most important decisions to take into account?
Yeah, so in times of turbulent or unprecedented moments, what are the most important considerations to take into account in choosing the best course and making the best decisions for the organization?
Well, I guess I would start and say, and this has been an interesting thing as I've sat with my executive committee, is as we are making decisions, I will challenge our executive committee to say, how will we be measured after this crisis is over and we look back? How are we going to be measured against our organization's core values and our organization's culture? And will we have lived it? So that's probably the marker that I would start with. But I think you also have to be able, going back to the point you've heard me make many, many times, you have to be able to step away from a decision that you're making and looking at it in two ways. One, are you focused on the greater good? And secondly, in being focused on the greater good, is what you're doing, and is how you're implementing that decision going to have, again, the level of a focus on you achieving your long-term goals. Again, as an organization, you should have a long-term plan. You should be, as a leader, driving towards that long-term plan. And even in a crisis situation, while you have to make certain short-term decisions, how are those short-term decisions affecting your long-term goals that you're trying to achieve for the organization? Again, because you're wanting to drive the organization through the crisis, but as you come through the crisis, you don't want to have you don't want to have so torn down the organization that even if you've survived, you can't achieve your long-term goals. So you're in a circumstance where you need to always be able to, while acting short-term, stay focused on the long-term.
It's helpful. Are there other questions? Well, thank you, Tim, so much. We appreciate your time and your wisdom.